We want to welcome our viewers to the Johnson City Government Information Channel on Charter Cable Channel 192 and Comcast Cable Channel 19 to this live telecast of the February 12, 2019 Johnson City Regional Planning Commission meeting. This meeting will be rebroadcast on Friday, February 15th, 2019 at 12 p.m. Call the meeting of this commission to order. First on our agenda is invocation and pledge by Commissioner Harrell. Please stand.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your blessings. We ask you to give us wisdom and discernment in the matters we consider tonight. We ask all this in your holy and precious name. Amen.
Yeah.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of our agenda.
I move that we add an item to the agenda. Item 9 should be a request for variance from additional right-of-way, dedication to Lynn Road.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So be it. The next item on our agenda is the approval of last meeting's minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes from the January 8 meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Since there is no old business, we'll start with new business, and the first item is a Washington County rezoning request.
The request that you have before you this evening is for property located along Christian Church Road. If you turn up Boones Creek Road on Christian Church, the property would be on the left, the Westerly side. It's approximately 26 acres. It's currently zoned A1, and the Washington County A1 zoning district is a little different from the city's A1. The A1 in the county allows varied uses, including up to restaurants and some other commercial uses. But the property is now A1. They are requesting B3, which is a general commercial district. It is similar to your B3. The recommendation this evening is asked to be sent back to the county commission, who would be the final authority on the rezoning matter. The land is currently vacant, and they are proposing to, They're proposing to place a call center on the property. A concept plan is required, has been provided by the petitioner, and it shows an access onto Christian Church Road. And as we discussed in our workshop, there is the possibility of the expansion of Christian Church Road for 3 lanes, so you would be able to accommodate additional traffic more. The largest shift on the call center's rotation would be approximately 1,200 employees. So the building, they're also looking at doing another entrance, possibly down directly to Boones Creek Road, and that would help alleviate as well. But may I answer any questions? Staff is recommending approval. Water and sewer are available to the property and adequate for the request.
Any questions of staff? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. We'll now open up the floor for any public comments for or against. And if you will, when you if you'll step to the podium and state your name and address.
My name's Lynn Hodge. I live at 281 Highland Church Road, and I am for this. It'd be a great asset to Washington County and the Boones Creek community, and I believe it'll also act as a catalyst for the Boones Creek corridor, and I think you'll see many more structures coming that way as time goes on, and I would appreciate your vote for it.
Thanks, sir.
If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for or against?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Holcomb. I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates. We're located at 200 South Tryon Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. Part of the development team here that brought you that project, and here just if you have any additional questions from the workshop or that have come up since then.
Any questions of Mr. Holcomb? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else for or against? Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment and turn it to the commission for discussion.
I just have one question for our staff.
Okay.
Will we be providing any other services other than water, as far as fire, police, anything like that, even though it's in the county? Is that part of a reciprocating agreement?
Who can answer that?
Apart from fire, police will generally be covered by the county. Fire, yes, we will provide fire services, higher cost. Water and sewer, outside city rates, that's basically what is going to apply. Being a commercial piece of property, if you were residential, other issues related to schools may come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, discussion?
Somebody mentioned some knowledge of a traffic impact study that was done prior to this in our workshop. Can anyone share those results briefly with us?
I believe that was Mr. Holcomb, is that correct?
Just the executive summary.
Sure, understood. We did study this. We've studied it two different scenarios, one with the drive to Boones Creek Road and one without. Both scenarios worked with some improvements that were stated, one of those being the widening of Christian Church Road as we work through with Johnson City staff that would take that to 3 lanes. There's a minor improvement to the Christian Church Road and Boones Creek Road intersection that would provide a right turn as you're coming from the highway onto Christian Church Road, and with that widening, the mast arm on that existing signal would need to be relocated and another head added to that signal to make it line up with the improvements associated with the Boones Creek Road driveway that we're hoping to obtain that easement across that neighboring property. The intent there would be a scenario that mirrors what the Power Board has across the street, so they have both accel and decel lanes. As part of our initial study, we also did a traffic signal warrant analysis for that intersection. Unfortunately, at this point, none of the warrants were met for the need for that signal, though once that driveway, once the easement was obtained and we proposed that driveway, we would want to revisit that signal request with both the city and the DOT, just from a usability and safety standpoint, using that and trying to make left turns out of both the Power Board site and this call center site. So more to come on that.
How far in distance is the proposed drive cut that would go directly into Boones Creek from the existing Christian Church Road intersection at Boones Creek?
I believe it's approximately 800 feet.
So I guess perhaps I'm misunderstanding you. With traffic signal request in the future, if that was made, you're not proposing having 2 traffic signals within 800 feet, surely?
We would recommend that we add a signal to that intersection with the power company because they are full movement drives onto Boones Creek Road.
So how close would those 2 signals then be, I guess?
I'd have to revisit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But within a fairly short
It would be a fairly short scenario, but not substantially shorter than what's already out there between Christian Church Road and where the hotel road is.
Does anybody else, any other staff have an answer to Commissioner Wiles' question about the distance?
I've got
Thanks.
one more question for you. How long is it, these improvements that you're talking about making to Christian Church, maybe some of the other roads there, how long do you think it's going to be before those could take effect?
So the development team RFP is out. Right now, the time frame for that is responses back to the end user, basically the 1st of April. From that, there would be a selection period and then straight into design and construction with the intent that the project would be under construction by this fall, early fall.
That's the road improvements or the project itself
Altogether.
altogether?
It would all be
So
handled.
they'll run together
Yes, sir.
concurrently?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mr.
Virginia, Johnson
Holcomb.
City.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the rezoning request from A1 to B3.
I'll second that.
Second. Ms. Nicole, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Harrell,
No.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshoni,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Okay, next is rezoning request on Lake Park Drive.
This is a request to rezone a piece of property on Lake Park Drive from I-1 Light Industrial to B4 Arterial Business District. The purpose of this rezoning request is to use a portion of the existing building for kids' recreation space. The site, as it is at this moment, is used as a corporate office for phase amusement, and it's highly underutilized. They have a large parking lot out there that is 90% empty almost all the time. So this is a kind of a mixed use, will provide a mixed use opportunity for that particular site. The future land use map designates this particular area for commercial development, although it is currently zoned industrial. So the rezoning request will align the zoning of this property with the future land use map. The surrounding uses are essentially office. In the south, that's where we have the driver's license, and to the east, these are two offices, and this proposed use will not be in conflict with the surrounding land uses. Staff recommends approval, considering that this particular request is in line with the future land use map and will not unduly affect the surrounding land uses.
Any questions of staff? Thanks, Asan. Now open the floor for public comment. And again, when you step to the podium, if you'll give your name and address.
Commissioners, good evening. My name is Matt Wiljum, and I am with the company seeking the rezoning. It's 4721 Lake Park Drive. I don't want to take up too much of your time. You have staff approval. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. Hopefully, we'll get your favorable acceptance of this rezoning.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment session and open it up for commission discussion.
Motion to approve
Second.
based on the rationale that the land use plan is compatible with this rezoning request.
Second.
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 Okay. Ms. Nicole?
Okay. Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshoni,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next is Millard Street rezoning request. Got the big boss this time.
Thank you, Commissioners. Let me forward here. The property that's under consideration is 122 East Millard Street. It's located just north and east of downtown. Downtown is down here on the bottom part of the screen, off of Water Street. And I'll get to a description map here in just a minute. The request is to rezone this property outlined in blue from B3, that's the current zoning, to I1, light industrial. Give you an idea of the surrounding zoning, you'll see that property on both sides of the site are currently zoned B3. As you move in the westerly direction towards downtown, you pick up the downtown zoning, and in fact, the downtown zoning attaches to this building. So you'll see right here the B2 zoning, that is the zoning for the Quantum Leap, which is attached to the back of this building. But I do want to clarify that that portion of the building, that parcel is not under consideration, just the parcel to the east, the roughly 65,000 square foot building that was previously used as the bed in a box facility. So let's take a look at the location map here, discuss a couple of physical characteristics. This is the building right here. This is showing both of them together. This is the Quantum Leap. You can see here Google has properly noted that. And then this is the 65,000 square foot building where bed in a box was operating previously. Out in front of the building is a surface parking lot. There are 2 rows of mini warehouse storage. My understanding is those would be removed. Now, it's not a condition. You don't have the ability to add that as a condition. I'm just giving you data. But that most likely those would be removed as part of this redevelopment if it moves forward. Here, you'll get an idea of its proximity to downtown. You'll see the railroad tracks. Again, you see Water Street right here. And this is Roan Street running north and south to generalize yourself in terms of proximity. Surrounding land uses, you will see that on the north side of the site, you do have a mix of institution as well as residential and commercial. On the south side of the site, you do have the railroad tracks, and then this is not developed where the creek is located. And then you have the entertainment space, the indoor amusement or recreation leading in towards downtown. And then as you cross over the interstate, I-26, it does cross over into industrial. So let's talk a little bit about, this is going to be the hard part of this conversation. The future land use map does not indicate support for industrial zoning in this area. The orange area, this kind of goldish orange color, is identified on your future land use map as downtown business. And the downtown business is calling for just that. It is calling for your typical mixed-use, urban core type of retail, restaurant, cottage industry, residential, things of that nature. This rezoning, if approved, would allow for light industrial uses on this property. So let's back up for a little bit and talk about the history of this property. Many of you may know that this was the Giant Foods warehousing facility, and then after Giant Foods vacated, it was redeveloped for the Bed in a Box facility in 2013. Now, you may be asking, well, how did Bed in a Box meet the definition of B3 and any other light industrial user does not? Well, the distinction is in the intent of the language of the ordinance, where Bed in a box was considered handcrafted assembly and production, and that is permitted in the B3 as well as in the B2. Handcrafted assembly and production requires some sort of a retail component, some sort of a storefront component. And so if any of you were ever at the Bed in a Box facility, you saw that they have a showroom right off of Millard, and so you were able to go in and purchase what they were assembling or manufacturing there. The request today to rezone to light industrial is to expand beyond just showroom or retail-based industrial and assemblage. It would be to allow full light industrial use of the property, meaning not retail, wholesaling, and typical light industrial uses that all are conducted within the walls of that building. It is important to note that light industrial is not similar to heavy industrial in that light industrial is required to be conducted entirely within the walls of the building. They cannot create vibration, noise, odor, glare, all of those kind of troublesome situations that are typically associated with your heavy industrial. I do want to clarify one thing. Commissioner Hickson was asking me on the way in on the cumulative nature of the code and whether or not all of the uses that are already allowed in the B3 or in the downtown, could those still be used if the property was rezoned to light industrial? And I do want to correct myself, Commissioner, that in looking at the staff report that was provided to you, if you look at, and I'm not sure if when the compilation was made of the entire agenda packet, if the page numbers were lost, but on my particular report, starting on page 6 of 11, you'll see the list of permitted uses in the light industrial. Those are specific to that zone. They are not cumulative backwards, so they are specific to that zone. That is important to note. However, I would argue that based on the development of the site and the fact that the site is already is here and has been recently upfit, that it would be consistent with all of the uses listed in the light industrial table. So moving forward, staff does recommend approval of this. This is a request that's coming to you from the property owner, Mr. Bill Bradley. He is here in the audience and he may speak tonight. But it is also coming forward from our economic development folks at NetRep. They are shopping a particular user for this facility that would meet the definition of the light industrial. They're not a retailer. They would be doing some sort of a wholesaling component, and she may be able to provide more detail on that. But she here is too in the room from NetRep. If this site was vacant and they were asking for light industrial, staff would be recommending denial. But based on the fact that this site has previously been developed, exists, and has been recently upfit as recent as 2013, and would be compatible with all the uses listed in the light industrial table, we are recommending approval of this. Now, any use that is mentioned to you by Mr. Bradley or any use that's mentioned to you by NetRep, keep in mind that might be what they're shopping for this particular situation. But you do need to keep in mind all of the uses in the table. Those would be permitted. The other is that if this particular user were to only use the facility for a temporary amount of time and they relocate, the zoning would be in place until it's asked to be changed again. So several things to consider. But again, based on the current development of the site and based on its proximity to other industrial, if it is rezoned, it would actually link back into industrial zoning, or I should say it would be contiguous with other industrial zoning. So staff does not believe that this would be considered spot zoning. This is a little bit of a unique situation. So staff does recommend approval, and I'll turn it back over to you.
I have a question, Mr. Mitchell. Tell me a little bit more about the distinction if the property was vacant.
If the property was vacant, then new development of the property would be all of the development entitlements associated with the light industrial district would come into play. And so since any development standards are not coming into play in terms of setbacks or buffering or the height of the structure or other specific development standards, the site's already developed, and so in terms of it's just a reuse. And so based on the fact that it is simply just a reuse, that speaks to our recommending approval. Hopefully that answers your question.
Any other questions of staff?
Do we know if there is a lease or letter of intent in place at this point with this property?
I do not. We had inquired about that when the process began, and I believe that was being sought, but I'm not sure if that has been achieved as we sit here tonight.
Would it be more appropriate to defer this until there was such a lease, so we knew what was intended to go in, or?
Well, I wouldn't jump yet until you hear from Ms. Summers. She may or may, it depends on what her statement is. I do know that this is time sensitive, and so the hope from their perspective is that a recommendation is made tonight, and that they will be tracking an expedited hearing process through the City Commission in an attempt to win that contract. Part of the plan is to get the zoning and entitlements in place to potentially beat out other entities that might be vying for this particular contract.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you.
One
excuse
other
me.
question. Would this be the only I-1 zoning in the downtown business district?
In this general vicinity, yes.
Okay.
I'd have to pull out the zoning map, which I'm happy to do on my laptop, and I can advise you when I come back up. But in this general vicinity, you can see here that everything is in red. But I can say that it would be contiguous with industrial zoning here at Elm Street. So it would not be standing alone. There is some danger if it would be just sitting there. That's the whole thing you get into about spot zoning. But it is contiguous with other zoning. It is, in terms of, let me go forward here a little bit. You'll see that it is also within close proximity to I-26. It's less, and you can see here I did the Google direction search. It's 2 minutes, less than a half a mile for the transportation, the trucking, things like that would be generated from this to get on and off of I-26. So its proximity to other industrial use, I believe, benefits this particular request. If it was closer to downtown and if it was undeveloped and there were more unknowns, it's then that staff would begin to get more concerned.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. And again, if you'll state your name and address.
Is that okay? My name's Dan Bolton. My wife and I are the other block on the Quantum Leap side there. So we're the owners of Quantum Leap at 117 East King Street. And I mean, we're for this, but we do have some concerns that we just want to see if there's some advice you can give us, especially if you think about sharing the wall, not knowing what's going in there. How do we deal with noise if that becomes an issue? And also from a trucking standpoint, because making the right on King Street in front of the Bed in a Box building, how will that slow down traffic for us? So just concerns that we have. I mean, I think it's great to put stuff in there just as we get more information. So.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
I am Bill Bradley, and the owner of the building. I have in 2013 modified the building. At that time, it was basically a warehouse and mini storage. and I have upgraded it to meet all regulations of the city, which makes it more for light industry than a warehouse. And I would not want to ever go back to that.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments for or against?
I'm Alicia Summers with the Northeast Tennessee Regional Partnership, and we are in support of the rezoning. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
It's a quick question. You get somebody in there, how long do you see that they would occupy the space?
It's just, I believe it's dependent on the terms of the lease agreement, the potential lease agreement.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Alicia, in terms of the requests of the folks from Quantum Leap, would there be any kind of noise issues or any other type of issue which might deter them successfully using their building?
We've had extensive discussions with this prospective tenant, and they've indicated to us that there were not going to be any undue or loud or vibration noises occurring.
Thank you.
Jamie?
In terms of your prospective business client, how will they get their product out? Will it be through 18-wheeler, through rail?
It's through 18-wheeler, so they'll be loading on semis, yes.
Okay, and do you know the number of trips they will be making a day or week
I do not.
in perspective? And are you basically in a bid process to garner a business to relocate here to Johnson City?
We are.
Thank you.
Ms. Summers, can you update us the status of the negotiations with the prospective tenant, whether a LOI, a lease, or where we are in that process?
The company is waiting for the word on the rezoning before they enter into any sort of lease agreement. It's contingent on the rezoning.
Have they selected this site already?
They have not.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other?
Follow up to Mr. Hickson's question. Are there other sites within the city that they're looking at?
There are, and outside of the county as well.
Thank you.
A question for Preston. Where'd you go? There you are. You mentioned, in respect to Mr. Bolton's comment, there's some requirements in the rezoning about noise and vibration and all those things that would address some of the concerns. Am I accurate in that statement?
You are correct. If you're referencing the list of uses in the light industrial, it does indicate, and I'm reading here from the light industrial permitted use table, it's 6.19217. Fabrication, compounding, assembly, processing, repair, manufacturing, packaging of finished or semi-finished materials, where all operations, including storage and finished goods, are contained within enclosed buildings. Such allowed uses shall not produce exterior smoke, dust, noise, odor, unusual lighting, vibrations, fumes, fire hazards, or other objectionable, noxious, or injurious conditions. So that's the definition of light industrial, really. Heavy industrial is typically your, the landfill, an asphalt plant, other things where the production of goods is occurring outside. The other main difference is, as you know, heavy industrial generally is producing something from a raw material. Typically, light industrial is they are assembling or even manufacturing from already previously manufactured parts. But again, that distinction that it all has to occur within that structure itself. But like I had mentioned before, keep in mind the rest of the uses in that list, and so consider that those would also be permitted uses on this site if it was rezoned. Now, something else just to consider is that rezoning is not permanent. It is permanent until such time that someone asks to come and get another rezoning. Now, ultimately, It's up to the city commission as to exactly whether or not property does or does not get rezoned. But just know that development and zoning is an organic process. It will change and it will evolve over time. In this particular case, because of the unique situation of the building itself and the site already being developed, and, kind of a rose is a rose. It looks and smells like a light industrial facility. It just creates a little bit of a problem here because he can't do light industrial in what is constructed as a light industrial building. But that's not to say that he can't do other things that he's done previously. So keep in mind, what are the entitlements that are in place today versus what's being asked? Is what's being asked reasonable and consistent with where we want to be and grow in our city? It is inconsistent with the future land use map. You are permitted to make a recommendation that is not consistent with the land use. It would be recommended that you make a statement why, if you wanted to support this. But you could also support the land use plan and say, no, we really want to continue to grow and support those particular downtown uses. So it's a little bit of a unique situation here.
So is this a temporary zoning request? Would it
No,
revert-
zoning cannot be temporary.
Okay.
Right, zoning cannot sunset.
Okay.
Meaning you could not zone, or the city commission could not zone a property and then put a deadline on it.
Okay.
It would be whatever zoning it's going to be in perpetuity until such time as somebody comes forward and asks to get it changed again.
Other item, we're talking about 18-wheelers moving in and around downtown. Are the roads, wide enough to handle 18-wheelers to be able to get over to the interstate and so forth?
Yes, I would argue, now I'm not a transportation planner,
Right.
but in my years of experience in handling these types of cases and seeing this type of development, with the grid street network that is typical in a downtown core, it is able and capable to handle everything from bicycles and transit vehicles to your normal everyday cars and trucks, all the way up to your 18-wheelers. That grid network works beautifully. That's why the grid network has worked so long. It disperses traffic, it disperses vehicles. It is very different and designed very differently than your major arterials like you see today, like Boones Creek, like you were talking about before, where disbursement is more difficult because everybody is limited to a single artery. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Say something about the trucking. There's 5 loading docks on the truck. We have often had 5 loading docks full multiple times during the day with 53-foot trailers in. They could exit and go to the interstate. Basically, materials coming in came off the interstate and they went back out when they were sold. So I had no problem whatsoever handling 18-wheelers in there.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Even with all the storage buildings in there and all the parking spaces taken up.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? All right, with that, we'll close the public portion of this hearing and open it up to the commission. I'll start out by saying that I have 2 or 3 concerns. One, although it's technically not spot zoning, we've kind of jumped the boundary. And I also think that we could be setting a precedent because once we jump that boundary, then what's going to be the next request and what's going to be our response to that request. And if I understand correctly, our downtown is trying to rejuvenate, and I just wonder if allowing, quotation marks, industrial to head towards downtown is really what's good for us long term. That's other comments?
I share your concern I want to be as development-friendly as we possibly can. I certainly want to make Johnson City fit into that niche. I'm a little uncomfortable, and I understand, not being able to disclose who a potential tenant or somebody might be, but I'm a little uncomfortable being asked to put all my faith into the hopes that this particular tenant that you are in negotiations with will come into this space and zoning it for them to do so, because should that fall through, as we've said, the zoning is permanent. And so then we have opened up that potential space to many, many other tenants that may or may not be as desirable as the one that you all are trying to attract right now. So I'm really struggling with that. I'm hearing from staff the recommendation that we should approve this, and I put a lot of faith in staff's recommendation, but I'm also being asked to really believe a lot that I'm having a tough time grasping. I can't see that tenant. I can't see that particular use yet. So I guess I'm anxious to hear comments from some of the other commissioners, because I'm really struggling with it myself.
And I think it is fair to say that given the economic environment, sometimes we don't have the luxury of that information.
Right, it's true.
Other comments? Paul?
Mike.
Mike?
Since I worked on the master plan, I would have reservations. However, if you look at the area right along that street, the character of that street is largely light industrial. And this would be an adequate fit. The problem that I have is we don't know the longevity. Of course, we don't know the longevity of anything that moves in. But I would be amenable to seeing that as light industrial.
I do understand, sitting also on the JC Development Authority, and understand about development and rejuvenation of downtown, but I don't see any problem with this. I think it sits far enough away that it won't impact the historic area and what we're trying to do from a development authority perspective. And I think it would be great for Johnson City to have a company come in and occupy that space and use it.
I know I'm the new guy on the block here, so, however, I'm looking at it from a lot of different ways, and I think staff was accurate, and this is it's an ambiguous situation with a lot of moving parts to it. And from what it looks like, I think if this was an isolated spot in the middle of a historic district, it would be a no-brainer to say, we don't want to do that. But I think there's enough of the ambiguity of the space around it to where this seems like a reasonable request.
Other comments?
I think ultimately what I'm thinking is that this parcel was originally identified to be in the downtown business district for a reason. And with that, and the fact that we are being asked to approve a rezoning in the hopes of a lease that would be signed for potentially some period of time that we don't have yet, I have reservations on my approval of the request.
Other comments? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the rezoning request.
I second that motion.
Okay. Ms. Nicole, will you call the roll?
Okay. Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
No.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshoni,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Not a
Yes.
strong.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Cooper.
No. Thank you all. Good discussion. We appreciate it. Okay, next on our agenda is the Haynes property replat.
I have a lot of faith in two people. I hope they don't prove me wrong. They earn it. Yeah.
Mr. Will?
Chairman, Commissioners, for you is a request for final plat approval for the Kenneth Hayes property on West Market Street. This property consists of 2 parcels and contains Corinthians Bistro, Jim's Motorcycles, and Tri-Cities Batteries. The applicant is proposing to subdivide this property into 3 lots. At the time the reports were sent out, staff did request that the applicant add a non-exclusive permanent transportation easement and a shared parking note and an easement for the city water main, all of which the applicant's done. Staff recommends approval.
Any questions of staff? Will, how about explaining a little bit more about the shared parking? Does that basically allow adjacent properties to take credit for adjacent parking?
All of these properties, all of the lots are be across lots 1, 2, and 3 on this proposed replat, and all of these, it's existing parking now, so they're not required to add any additional parking, but the easement or the shared parking arrangement makes it legal to share parking across all the facilities.
But is each piece of property obligated to share? Let's say one of those pieces sold. We didn't have time to ask that question at 5 o'clock. I apologize.
Per the note on the plat, if one of the properties sold, the new property owner could not prohibit somebody from using the parking space on the adjoining property. So that note on the plat basically grants parking easement for all the other properties. And until that is ever replatted some other time and that note removed, one person could not stop the other.
Even if for some reason the new owner reduced the number of parking spaces?
The new owner could not, we will have enforcement authority at that time. Each of these uses has a minimum number of parking spaces. Let's assume that today they don't even meet that minimum, just an assumption. And then one of the property owners decided to reduce what you don't even meet the minimum, so you're making a bad situation worse. We will go in and stop that. We have enforcement authority on that. We will not permit that to happen.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. Again, if you state your name and address. Okay, seeing no takers, we'll close the public comment and open it up for commission discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve based on staff approval.
I second that.
Staff requests.
Yeah, you want to adjust your
thought they already met the
motion
conditions.
They
to,
already met the condition.
They already met the conditions, I thought Will said.
The notes that were requested in the staff report at the time, they've since added it to the final plat.
Okay.
all right. So we have a motion and second.
Thank you, Tim.
Sorry about that.
Hey, you're supposed to do it like this.
Nicole, please poll this group so we get done.
Commissioner Harrell.
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yes.
Commissioner Marchioni.
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich.
Yes.
Commissioner Wild.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
And Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next on our agenda is preliminary plat at Green Pond Road.
Thank you.
I knew they had already met it.
Thank you.
Chairman, Commissioners, before you receive a request to consider approval of a preliminary plat for the development of 62 lots on this currently vacant piece of property on Green Pond Road. It's currently made up of 2 parcels. The lot is zone RP3 for planned residential district. The eastern lot, this is the property that was recommended, you recommended a couple of months ago for annexation into the city, and the city commission approved that, also approved the rezoning of this piece of property to assignment of the RP3 zoning district. As earlier mentioned, this will create 62 lots. 2 or 3 of the lots, essentially this one and this, are basically reserved for stormwater management. The large sinkholes in that particular area. And we have a no-build area regulation around sinkholes in the city. The comprehensive plan designates this particular area for residential development, and he's proposing to do a residential development. It also calls for street interconnectivity. That's one reason he's providing these street stubs for possible connection to adjoining vacant land, both in the north and to the west of the property. This lot basically has very little or no right-of-way on West Market Street. So future development of this piece of property will have to come from this street stub being created at this particular point in time. Utilities, water is available on this side, sewer is not. In the approval of the annexation request, the city committed in the plan of services to extending sewer to this piece of property once the developer pulls grading permits. So that commitment is still in place. The subdivision as proposed meets both zoning ordinance requirements and subdivision regulations requirements. No variance is requested at this time. Staff recommends approval.
Any questions of staff? Thanks, Allison. We'll now open it for public comments. For or against? Please state your name and address, please, sir.
Good evening, Todd Wood, 1185 West Mountain View Road, number 3204 in Johnson City. I'm the engineer for the project, so just here to answer any questions you might have. I'm not going to reiterate what staff just said.
Any questions of Mr. Wood? Thank you, sir. Any other comments? We'll close the public portion and open it up for commission discussion.
Motion to approve based on the design is in line with the comprehensive plan and meets the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations of Johnson City.
Second.
Mr. Cole?
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yes.
Commissioner Marchioni.
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich.
Yes.
Commissioner Wild.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
And Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item is Trinity Development on People Street. A lot of rumors about this property.
So for publics.
Chairman, Commissioner, this is a request to approve the Johnson City Center subdivision preliminary plat. This is the old Kmart property along People Street. The property is currently vacant, although it's built. It's zone B4, commercial arterial business district, and its land use is commercial. The developer proposes to create a planned unit development on this piece of property that will consist in splitting the existing building into 3 condominium units, commercial condominium units, and creating 4 out parcels, standalone lots. The 4 out parcels will adjoin People's Street, and such they will each have their right of way on People's Street. The comprehensive plan contains a number of policies that will support this particular replat. For example, it is a policy of the city to minimize the negative impacts of vacant big box retail centers. This piece of property developed in the past, if you look at it currently, it looks blighted. It's a seal of asphalt, and the redevelopment of the site, both the out parcels and the existing building on the site, some landscaping will be incorporated into this development to make the site more appealing. Staff has determined that with the creation of 4 out parcels and 3 anchor stores at this particular location, there will be some significant increase in traffic at this intersection of People's Street and Green Line Road. At this moment, we already have some significant traffic issues. Cars sometimes almost back into state of Franklin. And with this additional development on this side, that would compound this particular problem. For the past 6 months, we've been working with the developer and the Public Works Department on what we can do to handle this particular transportation problem. Please permit me call on the city engineer to speak to the specific solutions that the Public Works Department is proposing to handle this particular issue.
Mr. Herron had my attention. What's your question?
You're going to explain the rationale and the function of the reworked intersection there at Green. And
Sure. Right now, it's a 4-way stop, and all you are familiar with it.
It's stopping.
And one of the questions you had of me earlier when we were discussing it in a workshop was traffic circle. We did propose a traffic signal, and we hired a consultant to design that signal, and this is some 15 years ago. And they recommended a roundabout, a circle. And we took a hard look at that, and we had constraints in that intersection that a large circle that would have to be large would not fit. We've got terrain issues, we have utility issues, major utility issues. So we're back to a traffic signal. The city had already been planning to put a signal there. It was just a matter of time and what might trigger it. We know it's a problem. Having this building to be redeveloped was what it took to kind of change some priorities and cause us to refocus on this intersection instead of another one on the other end of this street at Knob Creek Road. What's proposed is to add a double left off of People Street onto Green Line and a double right from Green Line onto People Street. Obviously, that is to take care of a heavy flow of traffic back into what's known as Johnson City crossings to get them in and out and onto State of Franklin. We're not doing quite the same on the Kmart side, but Kmart has access to both Green Line Road and to People Street with multiple driveways, so they're dispersed better. We will add an additional southbound lane on Green Line Road from their driveway on Green Line to the intersection and let that go forward into the double through lane that's already there on the other side of the intersection. We are widening and pushing back on property, so we're asking that this site dedicate some right-of-way. You can see in this little drawing here, unfortunately we have a match line separating from the intersection, but this is People Street. The new animal hospital is here. The Kmart site's here. Here's a little piece of right-of-way we need on People Street, and let me back up one more, went the wrong direction. Right here on Green Line Road, from their driveway down to the corner, we need this strip dedicated. And that is for a retaining wall, an additional part of a lane, but mainly for retaining wall. That's basically a description of what we're planning to do and why we need some additional right-of-way.
Any questions of?
I have a question.
Alan?
Alan,
Yes.
there is no intent on reopening Green Line Drive, is there?
No intent. That's permanently closed as far as staff's concerned. It would have be at the demand of the neighborhood, and we know that won't happen.
Alan, what's the timeline on making any of these changes?
Our plans are almost finished. City crews are going to build that this spring. We've got to get started soon as the rainy weather will let up. Some of the preliminary work could actually be done now if we were able to. But one of the major tenants in the rebuilt Kmart site wants to be open by July. So we've got to get in there and get things pretty well finished by then.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Staff is recommending approval, subject to the developer dedicating the additional right of way at final plat to do these improvements, take care of the traffic.
We'll open it up for public comment. If you'll state your name and address, please, sir.
Good evening. My name is Philip McAfee, representing Trinity Development Partners, 700 Montgomery Highway, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm here to answer any questions that you all may have of me relative to the proposal, and one request, since there is a stipulation, and we appreciate your staff, and they've been very good to work with. Since there is a stipulation relative to the right-of-way request, we would just want equal consideration. We've been operating in good faith along the way. It's our intent to continue to work that way. But if this is going to be a stipulation of approval, we just ask for continued cooperation with respect to our continued development opportunities for the proposed out parcels with respect to any setbacks or issues of that regard. Because if we're donating right-of-way, we weren't originally planning on that. We're more than happy to do it, but would need some help as we continue forward with our development plans. And we're very excited to be the catalyst for traffic improvements finally being made at that intersection. But again, here to answer any questions that you all may have of me.
Have you had discussions about what you may need from staff in that regard?
Yes, just in preliminary conversations, we have opportunities with at least one of the proposed out parcels. And at the time, I didn't know what kind of right-of-way we were talking about. I've only recently received the proposed right-of-way request to be able to understand what it was we were talking about. It doesn't appear that there is an issue, but as we proceed, what I'm babbling about are building setbacks off of arterial streets. I think it's 35 feet. We may need a little help and wiggle room with that. That's all that I'm talking about at this stage, because that's all that I know about.
Of course, we're really not in a position to
Understand.
do anything or to make any commitments in that regard, but
Understand
I can
completely.
assure you our staff will do everything they can to help
And
you with
everything that
that.
we've discussed has been within the boundaries of what they're allowed to do is all that we're asking. And I understand if there's no meat on the table, you can't eat. So
And
whatever.
we're glad to have you here, so I assure you, we'll do everything we can to cooperate.
Yes, sir.
So for your based on your proposed out parcels, do you currently, without requiring us to ask for the setbacks, do you have enough room to put in what you want?
Based on what I received most recently, I believe so. It hasn't been engineered. We're talking purely concepts, and we're still working with the proposed tenant. I believe we can make it work, but based on the conversation with your staff, I think that we can work through any issues we have. It just hadn't been a stipulation up until this point.
Understand. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Are you at liberty to disclose any of the tenants
Yes,
that
ma'am.
are going to be?
Yes, ma'am. You want to know?
Would you please?
I was wanting to hear what the rumors were. I heard you say that.
Well, Hobby Lobby.
If the rumor's good enough, I may be able to go with it.
Yeah, we all heard that one.
Okay, so Hobby Lobby, I can confirm Hobby Lobby. That building is 175,000 square feet. We've been able to successfully lease 145,000 square feet of that. So Hobby Lobby, and drum roll, I guess, at home furnishings.
Oh, wow.
So they're about 88,000 square feet plus or minus. And they have submitted for their permits as well. The reason I'm in town is to meet with our contractors and to attend this hearing, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll open, any other public comments for or against? Okay, with there being none, we'll close the public portion and open it up for discussion.
I have a question for Hassan.
Okay.
Hi. Knowing that we've kind of dealt with this similar issue with some other instances, if we request for the right of way, can we also put in the motion anything about if the proposed original plat was conformed and then not conformed based on the right of way? Should that be in the motion or out of the motion, or does it matter?
By operation of the zoning ordinance, he will be fine, because he will be covered under the zoning ordinance. That will basically say he will not be penalized setback-wise for donating additional right-of-way to the city. So there will be no issue with setbacks as far as that is concerned.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other discussion? Open for a motion?
All right, I'll move that we grant approval contingent upon the dedication of the requested right-of-way from the city.
Second.
Ms. McCobb?
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
I guess you're going to have to do all the motions. The guys are too shy. I don't understand.
She kicked me.
Okay, next is
Next
a
one's yours.
release of bond
I already have it
request.
written down for you.
I have it
Is
written
that correct?
in my own way. I need that in shorthand.
Chairman, Commissioners, in November 2017, the Planning Commission approved the final subdivision plat for the Beechwood Meadows Phase 1, Section 3, subject to $72,000 bond. The developer posted that bond, and since then, he's been developing the subdivision. You can see the houses have been built on site. A number of elements, infrastructure that are associated with those particular bonds, such as the extension, there's a tree that has to be constructed, extending from this driveway to this road that has not been completed. Sidewalks along this street have not been completed. So staff is not recommending that a bond be released because the infrastructure has not been completed. One element that was extensively discussed at that meeting included involved the use of the detention pond on lot 19 of this subdivision. And following legal advice from the city attorney, the Planning Commission approved that subdivision, required the bond, subject to 4 important conditions. The developer of construction was given the option to reserve lot 71 for future construction of a detention pond. He could also discuss with the owner of the pond on lot 19, Mr. Gary Phillips, and acquire or let Mr. Gary Phillips permit him to use that lot 19. If that was done, then lot 71 will become open for future development. That has not been done. He's been engaged with Mr. Phillips in a couple of discussions, and they have not been able to reach an agreement. Another option was for him to go ahead and construct the detention pond on lot 71. As you can see, this is the lot 71, this vacant area that has not been done. Detention pond has not been constructed there. The last option that the Planning Commission gave was that the developer should seek a declaratory judgment from court. He was given 1 year to seek that judgment. 1 year, the plat was approved, the bond posted in January 2018. 1 year has passed. By that 1 year deadline, he had not filed a lawsuit. And when I indicated to the developer that we will be taking this to the Planning Commission without any of these conditions being met, that may not go down well. So he proceeded to file the suit for the declaratory judgment. Since this involves some significant legal issues that is outside of my area of expertise, I wish that the city attorney speak on this, please.
Hearing? I think they're playing poker back there.
Cantrell had me occupied. It's our recommendation not to release the bond, but actually, with discussion at the workshop, to perhaps increase to $20,000 the bond. We do have the engineer here who is involved in that project and has indicated their problems, of course, using Lot 71. There is a declaratory judgment action on the court's docket for March the 25th, which is not that far off. I do think the court will make a decision on a very unique issue, which is since Lot 19 was originally platted, designed, and for stormwater for the entire subdivision, are the new developers entitled to go ahead and use that detention pond in their development? Or are they precluded from using that Lot 19 since they don't own it and they are increasing the volume of the water that's going into that piece of property? That's what courts are for. I'm convinced that there will be a decision on that. It could be appealed. Under that circumstance, I think we want to keep kicking our can down the road with the grip on the current developers with both a bond and the obligation to preserve Lot 71 for a detention pond if push comes to shove that that's what needs to happen.
We presently have two bonds. One, the 61,000 is basically for various sidewalks and things that really aren't connected to this issue.
Correct.
And the $10,000 bond is basically our hold on the detention issue. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mike?
You just asked my question.
Any other questions of council? Thanks. Okay, with that, we'll open it up for public comment. And again, please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Drew Hutchinson, 100 MedTech Parkway, Johnson City. I'm here on behalf of the developers, the new developers. I'm the one who's filed the declaratory judgment action. We would certainly ask that the bond be continued. We would obviously like it not to be increased, if at all possible, but I'm here to answer any questions you may have of me on behalf of the developers.
Any questions of? Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any other public comment for or against? Did I understand that the engineer is in fact in the audience? Do you mind stepping to the podium, please, for Mr. Wood?
We like to interrogate you.
I don't think you're going to need his counsel. We're not going to be that tough on you.
I'm not an attorney, and since there's a legal case coming here, I want to make sure I don't say anything I shouldn't say.
Fair enough. The one concern that we have had is the amount of the bond. And now we understand that in addition to simply excavation, if in fact Lot 71 is required to be the detention area, there's design cost and then ultimately construction cost.
Correct.
Can you characterize the total amount of expense that would amount to?
I had a discussion with staff and the city attorney on that, and there's a figure, I believe, of $20,000 that has been thrown out there. So if you throw in engineering and surveying costs and construction costs, and if you just use lot 71 and it's just creating a berm and some short section of pipe and a riser in there, then 20,000 is probably a pretty accurate number to use.
Any other questions of Mr. Wood? Thank you, sir. See, you didn't need him.
Always want to be prepared then.
Any other public comment? Okay, with that, we'll close the public portion and open it up for discussion.
So do we think 20,000 is enough to increase it if we voted that way? I know, I'm
certainly
talking
trust-
about the board.
Without seeing the design.
No disrespect to the lawyer.
Well, we're going to hold
Much.
Mr. Wood
To the
responsible.
engineer.
We're come looking for him.
I feel comfortable with that number.
I think we have to take his professional expertise into account. Any other comments, questions, discussion?
Give it, Stacy, go 5 for 5.
No, I'm giving you
Does
this.
somebody besides,
Motion
Make a motion that we not release the
Motion not to release the
$61,000
$61,000
Okay.
bond and to increase the amount of bond for Lot 71 to $20,000.
I'm second that.
any discussion? Ms. Nicole?
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yes.
Commissioner Marshoni.
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich. Yes. Commissioner Wild.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson. Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item is Julie Lane.
This is Julie Lane stuff. I mean, on this pipe. I found it before, but now I can't find it.
This one starts on page 40.
Chairman, Commissioners, before you is a request to annex two parcels at 111, two parcels totaling 5.01 acres at 111 Julie Lane and 0 Julie Lane, which is at the intersection of Carroll Creek and Julie Lane. Annexation was requested by the property owner, Greg Fellers. The property, as you can see here in the zoning map, does adjoin the city limits. The applicant has requested R4's medium residential zoning, which is compatible with the zoning in the surrounding area. In fact, it's the same zoning of this prop where the Fountain of Life Church sits, and this PUD single-family development is zoned R4. And it's consistent with the pattern of development we see on North Roan Street, north of Carroll Creek Road as you proceed out North Roan Street, where you see commercial development on the North Roan Street corridor with multifamily, and then as you transition out into the single family, as you get further away from Roan Street. There's been no concept plan submitted with this annexation. There's no proposed development at this time. Therefore, financial staff presented three different scenarios of financial analysis. Excuse me. One, a vacant lot scenario, two, single family, and three, multifamily. If the property were to remain vacant, as you can see here that it is, it would yield a annual property tax of $1,241. Now, with the help of the city engineer, who helped, thank you very much. I had a water bottle and I ran out of water. The help of the city engineer, who designed this little sketch of what a possible single-family development might consist of at this property. This is based off of 16 lots, and that would estimate approximately $24,200 of revenue to the city. And in the third scenario, R4 zoning does allow for multifamily development at with a maximum density of 14 units per acre. If he were to combine the two lots, that would be allow him to build 70 units at that location. We based the estimate off on this analysis at a slightly more conservative figure of 65 units. And we'd estimate that it would bring in approximately $72,000 of revenue to the city. Staff recommends the annexation, the approval of the annexation request, the plan of services, and the R4 zoning. And the water and sewer is available currently to the property.
Questions of staff?
Did you factor in any setbacks for future road expansion?
We didn't, I think a lot of that would be done at a time if a concept plan were presented. But
Isn't there like a fire hydrant out in the middle of that property? She's out on the neighboring property.
you know, there is a fire hydrant out in the middle of the property.
Yeah. Like maybe 30, 40 yards in. I'm just curious.
Where that jag is, we'll get back to the map.
I know there was a study done back in the 80s on expanding Carroll Creek to 3 lanes. And I was just curious if that property line on the lower property is based on that setback right of way. Thank you.
Here comes the guru.
Here come reinforcements.
The tap.
Late 90s, when we got the plan. We do have a plan to improve Carroll Creek Road from what I call Kingsport Highway or North Rome Street all the way to the Bristol Highway. It's a combination in this area of a 3-lane with sidewalks on each side, one sidewalk on that side being a wider one for multipurpose path. That right-of-way does not reflect those plans. What you're accustomed to seeing is the dedication of right-of-way like earlier tonight with the other project. That usually will happen with a subdivision plat, not annexation.
Thanks, sir. Just want them to know.
Any other comment, questions of staff? Okay, there being none, I'll open it. Oh, excuse me.
If that goes to the higher density use, there is a requirement to put buffering up against that single-family complex, correct?
I think there's a requirement there's not a requirement from R4 to R4, but with the apartment complex, there would be a buffering requirement, a buffer requirement.
Because it's single family.
Because it abuts the single-family district.
Other questions?
But there would be no buffering requirement to the adjoining county property.
That it?
That's it.
Thanks, Will. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Other than he confirmed that there are hydrants located in the vicinity.
That will open it up for public comment, pro or for or against. If you'll state your name and address, please, sir.
My name is Hank Hughes. I live at 100 Chadwick Circle. That is the first house in the development that adjoins the property. My concerns, I have 2 concerns. The first concern is with the residential single-family going into Julie Lane. Julie Lane is only probably about 15 feet wide. There's not really a lot of area for vehicles to go up and down there, side by side. A lot of times, even when the church is letting out, you have to pull over to the side to let vehicles in and out. So my concern there is the traffic flow. With 70 units, if they go to a higher density plan, the impact that it would have on the existing 18 houses up there as far as property values go. As you can see, most of the houses in this whole area is all single-family homes. To build townhouses and apartments there, to me, would be an eyesore for the community, to everyone that lives around there that is in single-family homes. I have no problem with single-family homes going in there, as long as the road is widened, at their expense. Of course, I wouldn't expect the city to do that. And as you said, there is a fire extinguisher that's right at the front of the church, probably about 15 feet onto that property, or 10 feet over from that property. I'm not exactly sure. That's my concerns, and especially with more density, the securities of our property and our development up there would be also a concern.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments for or against?
Greg Fellers. I'm the owner of the property, and I'm the one that requested the annexation. And I just think it'd be a good piece of property to take into the city and have more tax base for you.
Thank
If
you,
you got
sir.
any questions, I'll try to answer them. I don't have any concept plan. I don't, at this time. I just bought the property about 2 months ago.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments for or against?
Commissioners, my name is David Crockett. I'm a resident at 113 Chadwick Circle. I'm also our HOA Vice President. I'm aware of this request for annexation, but the concerns that I have are similar to what was just stated about multifamily dwellings. For single-family dwellings, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But to compound the amount of traffic and the number of people for such, I think would be a problem for us that live at the top of the hill. Of course, as he stated, the road would need to be widened. Those are my concerns. Plus, there's the creeks down there at the bottom of the hill, and when there's a lot of rain, there's some drainage problems down there at the foot of the hill. But my main concern is the overabundance of people in such a small confined space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crockett. And understand that all we are addressing is the annexation. We cannot address any subsequent use that would ultimately be submitted to staff and would have to go through our normal approval process. Any other comments for or against?
Good evening. My name is Steve Tallarico. I live at 4140 Bradford Lane. I'm directly across the street from the church. Obviously, it brings up a lot of concerns for me and my family. I'm glad I'm here tonight to actually understand a little bit more about it and what goes all into it. But my one concern with a lot of the gentlemen that just came up here is, what does that traffic look like right there in front of my house? Lane is on Carroll Creek Road is pretty narrow as it is, especially as a 2-lane. Then Julie Lane, excuse me, is very narrow as well. Excuse me, not very good at public speaking.
Did he bring you water too?
Oh, no, I'm good, thank you, I'll suffice. But, so that smaller road right there on Julie Lane, and I know, living there for, close to 5 years, I see the traffic that comes in and out of that church on Sundays, Wednesday nights, and having a high-density living area, what is that going to do for the overall community? And I'm all about, having our city grow. I love what's going on with downtown. My wife loves it. My family loves it because it's something to enjoy. But I also love looking out my window and seeing some farmland. I enjoy the community as overall, and I just wanted to voice that and kind of understand where I'm coming from, especially from a person who lives right across the street.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Any other comments for or against. Alan, would you, with that said, we'll close the public hearing. Alan, can you speak to the construction of Julie Lane?
Julie Lane hasn't had a whole lot done to it. Probably started out as a private driveway to the farm, and then as the church was built, some improvements were made by private parties. At some point, it became a county road. And it was a public street when the city annexed in that area. And it became our responsibility when we annexed it. It would be typical today at the single-family development that it was built at the end of it, that we would, if that were going on today, we would be asking that developer to have participated in improvement of that street. I'm not sure why it didn't happen then. So it is a marginal street. There's no doubt about it.
Were those houses built and then annexed in?
I can't tell you for sure on that, but
'Cause
I
it's
do
still
remember
is
we
R4.
reviewed and approved the plan because it's in our region for subdivision approval.
Why
But
would
I
it be
don't remember
R4?
if it was annexed. Generally, when a subdivision like that, I'm going to have to say this and not really give you a complete answer, but we've had the materials agreement from Water Sewer where we participate in the cost of the water and sewer lines. And I'm sure that that development participated, and one of the requirements is you are to be annexed at the time of development.
Right. I just don't understand why it was zoned R4.
Depending on when it was,
Huh?
or depending on when it was.
Single family.
Okay, I think we've closed the public hearing. Turn it over to commission for discussion.
Well, could you go back to, I don't know if you showed us, I think you did at the very beginning, an image that shows well, maybe the top one is all I'm really looking for, is R4 is what is adjacent.
This is R4. This development here is zoned R4, as is the church. And then
What is,
that's reflected here.
and then that's,
This is commercial, then out here at the intersection would be your Walgreens.
okay.
Then you
And,
have single-family R2 across the street.
and on the, adjacent to the property that's being requested for annexation, that's agricultural?
Yes. This is all zoned A1, and this county zoning does permit single-family in the county.
Will, does the comprehensive plan speak to what the city wanted that corridor to be zoned upon annexation?
Residential.
Okay.
Residential, and
Specifically within those zoning
Yeah, it-
requirements,
the-
R4 being
yeah,
permissible?
in the future land use map too, it indicates commercial development along the corridor itself with residential development as you go away from the corridor, and you see that pattern with the mix of multifamily and single family as you get up. We've done the Cedar Rock development here. We had that come through in numerous phases where there are apartments along off of North Roan Street, and then as you get further out, you get into single family development. So it is consistent with the comp plan. It's consistent with the future land use plan.
So is it the opinion of staff that R4 would be the most appropriate zoning
Yes,
for this
ma'am.
parcel? There's none other that you all would recommend if you had a choice?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
The reason, go ahead. Sorry.
But we are not discussing rezoning. We are discussing annexation. Am I correct?
Well,
Yes, but you have
really
to,
both.
you're approving a plan of services and the rezoning request.
At
Or,
the
I'm
same-
sorry, the zoning assignment.
Mike, did you get your question answered?
Yeah.
Okay. As going to R4 at its highest density, what's the maximum number of units that can be put on those?
14 units per acre, which if you took 111 Julie Lane by itself, that's 59 units. You could throw in another 11 on 0. If you combine the lots, that would give you 70. Development will be limited to some degree, I would imagine, on the 0 Julie Lane because this is in a floodplain. It doesn't mean development's impossible, but they would, I don't know if the developer would want to pursue those costs to be able to develop in the floodplain. But it would be 70 total
70 total units,
that he would be allowed.
and he's responsible for road improvements?
Road improvement would be, again, a lot of that would be analyzed at the time. We sent out to get feedback for the plan of services from all of the various departments, Public Works, engineering, the school, the person in charge of school bus transportation, and asked for comments. Without any specific concept plan at this time, a lot of those sorts of things would be addressed at the time of the concept plan, if one were to be submitted.
Well, you segue right into my soapbox. So at some point, I'd like the staff to start considering land impact fees, land use impact fees on particularly schools. I mean, if we added 70 units, 70 new kids at Lake Ridge, it's already at capacity. At some point, we got to start looking at that. Sorry, that's my
Well,
soapbox.
can you help me understand, if this was not annexed into the city, could the owner then they could request a change in zoning from the county?
Yes, ma'am, they could.
And so it could be the very same thing that would happen, it just would not benefit Johnson City in any way.
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, can you walk me through why you recommend R4 over the R2 that is contiguous across the street versus what is adjacent? Is that the reason, because of adjacency versus it being across the street?
Adjacency and honestly, I mean, more revenue for the city. The financial impact of the possibility of development.
But even though it's R4, it should have been zoned R2.
R2, yeah.
I mean, I get that it's zoned R4, but it's single-family homes. And it's been a long time since I've been up there. I didn't go up there, I apologize. But there's not any duplexes or anything up there, townhomes, right? All single-family homes. And I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just trying to find some rationale why they're particularly R4, not this property.
Let me clarify something on that, please. Although the houses are single family, it is a PUD. If you look at, If you look at this, you see that this is 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, all of them sitting on one lot. They are not on individual lots, as you ordinarily have in a single family residential neighborhood. So this is a PUD, and PUDs are not permitted in.
I didn't know it was a PUD.
In the R1.
Well, we had a homeowners association.
Okay.
Bernard, what, do we know actually the intent? I know we want to talk about annexation, but what's the actual intent from the owner if it's approved? I mean.
From our discussions with the owner, he intends to sell the property. I don't think at this time he wants to develop it. He intends to sell the property to some other developer for possible development. And to speak to the question that Commissioner Massioni raised on assigning zoning to the property, the commission, there are 3 things happening tonight. You are annexing the property, recommending annexation, which means bringing the property into the city. You are assigning a zone to the property. And then third, you are approving a plan of services, which we as a city will have to provide upon bringing the property into the city. Zoning is one element of a plan of services, but it's unique because it's really focusing on land use issues. Does the Planning Commission have powers to say, we don't think we should have multifamily or the possibility of multifamily development in this district, and we want to reduce the density, possible future density? Yes, Planning Commission can do that. You can reduce this from an R4 to an R3 to an R3, R2. R3, for example, will permit duplexes. If you go to R1, that's only single family. So that's a consideration. And my advice would be that if you wanted to go that route, it would be important to have that discussion or to have some input from the property owner who is requesting annexation. Because in requesting annexation, he requests a particular zone too. With respect to the change in zone, the way the future land use map kind of worked in this area is you've got one side of the plans for the future development of Carroll Creek Road makes this a collector street. So it widens the road to the position to provide that possibility where the road can be used even for multi-family development. It will be able to carry that traffic. So the future land use map, in considering this particular corridor, considered that street, that road improvement network. And what it basically did was created single family on one side of the street and multi-family on the other side. And that, I think that is the side that has a sidewalk too.
There's not a sidewalk.
No, I mean the future, the plans, the plans of construction of Carroll Creek. So that's the way it looked at it. It kind of placed single-family residential development further away from Carroll Creek Road, and then closer to the collector street, you have multi-family development possibilities. The future land use plan does not go into details like R1, R2, R3, like what you have in zoning. No, it doesn't have those clear-cut details.
Thanks, Asan. Any other discussion, comments? If not, do I hear a motion from somebody besides Commissioner Wild?
She's doing a fine job. Keep it up.
Commissioner Wild?
Can't any of these guys act?
I'm sorry, they're
My
shy.
The
God.
last motion.
Pardon?
I made the last motion.
We're going to play tits for
Ladies'
daddy?
turn now.
All right. Okay. Based on what Hassan has said, I move that we recommend approval of annexation of the properties at 111 Julie Lane and 0 Julie Lane with the R4 city zoning and the city's plan of services. Yes, I got it right.
Is there a second? Mr. Lowe is seconded.
Gotcha. Commissioner
Okay.
Harrell,
No.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Marchioni,
No.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
No.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes. Thank you all.
Motion approved.
All right, stay just a minute. Citizen at the back of the room, I'm going to wait till you finished. Asked me a question about the road improvement I mentioned for Cow Creek Road. That was funded in the late 90s as a measure. One reason it was funded is as a measure, we knew this valley was going to be growing. It was basically farmland. And by having plans on hand, we were going to be able to use those plans as subdivisions took place up and down that corridor to get those donations as allowed by subdivision. Until the recession in the early 2000s, I think there was a full intention of funding construction, buying right-of-way and funding construction. But there's no high priority on doing those construction activities to that road at this time. And the citizen asked me about how soon you're going to do it. So I felt like I needed to not leave that hanging there for the public that might be listening. The road is not funded for construction. But the plans are existing, and it's being used as a planning tool to reserve right-of-way along the corridor as development takes place.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, the final item on our agenda is the request for variance on Lynn Road.
Chairman, Commissioners, this is a request to grant a right-of-way variance 12.5 feet to this subdivision, Industrial Drive replat, subdivision along Lane Road and Industrial Drive at that intersection right here. The property owner is requesting this variance based on two reasons. First, he argues that the dedication of the additional right-of-way will basically make the property non-conforming with respect to front yard setbacks, and the front yard setback required being 30 feet. And secondly, dedication of additional right-of-way will have the potential of affecting a usable parking space on the lot. With respect to the first argument, zoning ordinance has provision for that. If a developer or a property owner dedicates additional right-of-way, that does not affect the setbacks. So the property will still be conforming for setback purposes. And this is a single family, basically it's single, although they're renting it, it's kind of legal non-conforming situation. We don't have any impact on driveways, as is claims in the request. With the dedication of additional right-of-way, he will still be able to drive through, both the property owner and then the visitors will still be able to drive through this driveway to access the lot. Furthermore, in this particular area, this is Lynn Road, you see that when these other lots were subdivided in the past, additional right-of-way was dedicated. That's why the right-of-way in this area is larger. It kind of jogs further inward, it's larger. And then it narrows from this point going in. So there's already precedence, and we don't have the kind of infrastructure already in place on this road that normally one would say you don't need additional right-of-way for. Things like sidewalks and drainage or in place. For this reason, staff recommends denial of the variance request.
Any questions of staff? What is the property presently zoned, Asan? Do you know what it is?
It is presently zoned, I think it's R3.
R3?
I think it's R3.
Okay. Thanks, Asan.
Of course.
What initiated this right-of-way request, Asan? Why, like the adjacent properties on that road have already dedicated right-of-way, correct? And this one has not?
This one has not.
Is this a recent request from the city? Is this has something happened? What brought this to light?
The property owner is replatting this piece of property. So if you look at this piece of property, you've got one lot, two, as it would be now, and three. Initially, this was a separate lot. If you look at this dash line, that was a separate lot. Okay. And what he is doing in this replatting process is removing that dash line. See the hook there, kind of bringing the two together. So he is involved in an act of subdivision. It was a combined property, basically.
So that's what
brought this to the attention of
thank you.
The city.
Subdivision regulations has a clause in it that says when you're subdividing land, right-of-way will be donated. And that's why you see staff coming to you with this. Staff cannot give relief to that on its own, just this board.
Understand, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Thanks, Asan. Okay, we'll open it up for public comment, for, or against.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ty LaRue. I'm the land surveyor who prepared this plat for the owners. My address is 744 Allison Road in Pawnee Flats. I would like to make one note that you had asked the question, Mrs. Wild, about why this is being done. This is a strange location because on Industrial Drive, you have property lines that were not perpendicular to the road. The owners, and there are three separate owners to be clear. There's actually Powell Construction is in the middle. There's Tony Henderson Landscaping, which is to the westerly side. And the owner to the east it's under the name of T&L. It's just an individual house on a lot. It's a rental house. It's not industrial. It's residential. The other two are like commercial use. Like I said, the property lines did not run perpendicular to the line on Industrial Drive. However, when they built the metal buildings on that road, they ran them parallel. So what we had is a situation where the buildings didn't really fit on the lots very well. So we've got with the 3 separate landowners, and we've kind of replatted it to make better lot lines so it fits the buildings better. I'm here to represent the owner of the house and his concern. I explained to him, I said, this is standard procedure. It's nothing out of the ordinary. He said, well, I'd like to, variance it because we're not really, the definition of a subdivision, I'm not sure if this would be considered a subdivision. You may correct me on this, because we're not really creating new lots. We are doing a replat. That's kind of a gray area sometimes, but that's why we want to request it, because I checked up and down Lynn Road before I came today. Hassan is correct. They did grant the 50-foot right-of-way on other lots. In all those situations along Lynn Road, you had a situation where you had one lot, say it was an acre or acre and a half, you were creating 2 lots. So we went from 1 to 2. We were making more buildable lots. In this situation, we're not doing that. We're just, it's staying the same. We're just moving the lot lines to improve the property lines that are there. So that's why we'd like to request this variance. If you have any questions.
We are having trouble understanding why, since the code allows for setback flexibility, if you will, relative to the the right-of-way, I just went brain dead, why that's an issue. So that's the first question. Can you address that?
It's, if you have a piece of property and you're helping your neighbor out, because the gentleman in the house, he's like, well, I don't have to do this. I just want to straighten the lines up for the Mr. Powell. He doesn't want to give the right-of-way away because, he's getting no reimbursement for that. And so I think that's kind of part of the issue. I was not aware of that fact that, with the setback issue, that it would not become it wouldn't hinder the property in any way. So, that would not be, I would agree with you that that's not really an issue, at least that fact.
And that at least based on the layout, second question, based on the layout, it doesn't appear to be that the parking is an issue either.
Well, that's what the customer was concerned with.
Fair enough.
So.
Fair enough. Gotcha. Any other questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments pro or for or against?
And thank you for sitting through all 8
Yeah.
agenda items before this one.
Very interesting.
With that, we'll close the public hearing and open it up for commission discussion. We're all shy again.
It appears to me as if the homeowners' concerns are really not valid in this particular situation. So for that reason, I am going to request that we deny the variance request for the additional right-of-way dedication on Lynn Road.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Nicole?
Commissioner Harrell,
Why didn't this go?
Mr. Harrell is
I'm still
thinking.
thinking.
That's
That's
all
you,
right.
Gary.
That's all right.
While he's thinking, I'm just curious, this is just for my knowledge, why didn't that go to the BZA?
Planning Commission has absolute and full authority on anything dealing with the subdivision regulations. If anybody challenges what you say with respect to subdivision regulations, you have to go to court, nowhere else. So this requirement for additional right-of-way dedication is in the subdivision regulations, not in the zoning ordinance.
Thank you.
BZA will only deal with variances in the zoning ordinance.
Thank you for the education, sir.
No, if you vote, no.
And with respect to what he said on whether this is a subdivision or not, yes, it is a subdivision. Every time you're moving a lot line, even by 1 inch, you are involved in an act of
Did we
subdivision.
actually move one of his lot lines? The requester?
Yes, as he's explained, both in the front and in this particular area. And when you take away a lot line, so if you take 2 lots and combine them into 1, that's an act of subdivision. If you take 1 lot, split it into 2, that's an act of subdivision. If you move lot lines between 2 lots, make one smaller and the other one bigger, that's an act of subdivision, yeah, under state law.
Okay, all right. You're up, General.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. So the
Hurry,
motion,
Nicole, before he changes his
The
mind.
the motion on the
Is
table is
to
the
deny
motion
the
to
variance
deny the
request.
variance. Okay, so,
So yes is no.
okay, so yes.
So yes is no.
Okay, Commissioner Hickson,
Then yes.
Commissioner Lowe,
No.
Commissioner Marchioni,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Cooper.
Yes,
Motion to deny approved.
thank you. I have one other item just for the commission. ASON handed out a corrected copy of the bylaws that we've been dealing with. We haven't had time to deal with them.
I can get one.
Okay, well, you see that Commissioner Wiles gets, and we'd like to come prepared next month to discuss and hopefully approve, okay? Any other?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Mike, you're up. All in favor? Oops, 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 oops.
Sorry, we already voted. No.
You can, but I'm asking for your attention just for a minute.
We will defer to you.
I will withdraw my motion.
Thank you. I just wanted to, and you know, maybe this is something I do in the future, I don't know, and we'll try to build it into the agenda. A couple of things I just wanted to make notes on. Number one, back on the rezoning for Millard Street. And basically, what I'd like to do is kind of follow up with a couple of comments based on things that I heard. And I would have interjected in certain cases if I felt it was important to interject, but I think everything worked out the way it was supposed to. But I just want to provide some clarification, some guidance for the future. One comment that I heard regarding drawing a line in the sand and the domino effect for rezonings. You're exactly right, Vice Chairman Cooper, that can happen. That rezonings do and can create a domino effect. However, precedence is not something that you have to worry about. So in land use law, land use cases, each case is independent of each other. And so therefore precedence is not set. Precedence is set by the courts. Anytime there is a court case, then and there are subsequent court cases, they do follow precedence. But in land use law, you actually are not bound by precedence. And so just wanted to give that clarification that each and every case is independent of the other one because it is contextually different. The circumstances may be different. So that's just something to think of as you move forward. Domino effects can happen. You may have rezonings around this area that come forward. Does not mean that you have to accept them. Does that make sense?
And I think I understand it, and I appreciate the comments, Preston. But we do have a land use scheme that we worked hard on, 10 years ago?
Yep.
And we've talked a number of times that it probably is time to take another hard look at it. And I would hope that we'd at least give some credence to that land use plan.
Oh, absolutely.
As far as making these kinds of decisions.
Absolutely.
So that's at least to a large part where I was coming from.
Right. And excellent comment. I just wanted to provide some clarification for you all as you move forward and you see other cases. There is no need for you to worry about setting precedents. Each case is independent of the other. The other is on the Kmart subdivision, and I appreciate Commissioner Wild asking the question. I believe it was you, or at least pointing out the obvious, that the request that was made by the applicant regarding the special consideration, and I think it's important, and I'm glad you all kind of went on record to say that there is no such deal-making that can occur, and that any kind of variance would have to be sought through the BZA. The only reason why I'm making this clarification on record, so to speak, is, or at least in the minutes, is that we may know out of those out parcels one or two possible tenants. And we may know how those one or two possible tenants might design their site. But we have no idea what the other remaining out parcels will be, how that site could be developed, and whether or not they're going to run into any setback issues. Now, Any future dedication of right-of-way, they're going to be pulling setbacks off of that future dedication, obviously. But you were right to call out, and Hassan made the clarification that those kind of deals cannot be made. And so the other was, the only final comment was, I wanted to point out, you're exactly right that it was tough, the conversation you had about the annexation, and I hope I can do this quickly. And if I can't, then I'll try to just do it verbally without any visual. Well, it might happen quickly for me. Hassan was absolutely correct that the future land use map and our comprehensive plan does not specify zoning districts. It would be a real nightmare if it specified zoning districts and then you had a request come in and it was one district off, above or below, and then you're kind of wrestling saying, gosh, why didn't we think about that? You're just not going to ever be able to come up with what are going to be the exact zoning districts. So instead, it's intended to be very broad. And so in doing so, I hope I'm zooming in on the right area. Where is, am I up far enough?
Go to the lake.
Yeah, there's Carroll Creek.
Right there, right in the middle.
Yeah, there we go.
Right there.
So, in doing so, if you zoom down into the to the proposed land use, to the future land use map, like what was clarified, all of this is located within our urban growth boundary. So these areas that are out on the outer edges that still have either active or passive agricultural land adjacent to newly developed residential, those are always going to be your hot spots. And you're always going to get the NIMBY comment, not in my backyard. I enjoy seeing pasture land. I enjoy seeing farmland. The thing to consider, which you did, which was appropriate, was, is this an urbanized area? Is it within our urban growth boundary? The other is that this kind of greenish yellow color is, as Hassan and Will pointed out, residential. Outside of that greenish color, this kind of lighter green teal color is also called for residential, but it's called for low-density residential. So the density call in this greenish yellow color actually supports medium to higher density residential. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Don't walk away here feeling like that you have, yes, those folks walked out, they're going to have to deal with this at the city commission, but from a planning perspective, as a planning board, as a planning commission, you supported your comp plan in this particular area because that green color does support higher density. The other is, and the comment was made, and it was certainly understood and accurate, the concern as it relates to single family in the area. And I feel like I'm still zooming out of the area. Help me re-find it if you could.
Come down a little bit, yeah.
Keep coming.
Go to the road above that dark block there. Yeah, you're right there in the crook of the left.
That's the lake, right?
Yep.
Oh, right here.
That's Carroll Creek
There we
where
go.
your arrow
Yeah,
is.
there we go. I believe. Well, regardless,
It's just off 36. Right?
oh, there we go, right there. The other, and we talked about this because we had this conversation at our staff level planning meeting about whether or not this would be supported. And yes, you do have single family back in here, but as it should have been pointed out, which it was, this is a PUD. The other is that from a sound planning perspective, it's actually good planning to increase your density as you're getting closer to your major arterials. As you get away from your major arterials, that's where you want your density to fall off. I do recognize that you've got single family across the street, and much of that single family fronts onto a major arterial, which makes that tough. But from a land use planning perspective, you did not violate good planning by supporting an increase in density here, because this is closer to that major arterial. If this property was back here and the lower density have to be traveled through to get to higher density, that's not recommended. That's not supported, to travel through low density to get to high density. Does that make sense? So just a couple of things I just wanted to clarify, but thank you.
Thank you.
While we're clarifying things, the master plan for Johnson City was completed between 2002 and 2009. The components of the master plan are to be reevaluated every 5 years. None of the components have ever been reevaluated.
Right.
Is there any kind of timetable set to review these components?
Yes. What we, and I've already begun those conversations with the city manager. The gentleman at my far right, Mr. Manley, he will be the primary lead on the update to our comprehensive plan. And what we are looking to do is what I call, and I use this term loosely, but a bridge plan. You're exactly right. We should have done updates to the plan every 5 to 7 years. That is good planning for your comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, we didn't, and there are many other communities around the nation that did not do that, and many that were adopted in 2000 because that was a kind of a good year to do it, and a lot of communities did it then and set a 20-year horizon, are now up against this deadline, and we're one of them. But what I'd like to do, and what I've asked the city manager, is to not embark on a $150,000, $200,000 comprehensive plan update at this time, and especially since we are right upon the Census 2020 recount. And that big data that comes with the 10-year census is very important data. And so we would like to wait on the 2020 count, and that data usually comes in the spring of the following year, so we should get all of that is released by the Census Bureau in about April or May of 2021. But in the interim, so that we don't have a gap, we're going to do a bridge plan, and that bridge plan will address it will look at all of the current goals, objectives, and policies in the comp plan, what's working, what's not working, and then develop interim bridge policies to be able to carry us over until we get to new census data and can embark on a much more comprehensive, robust comp plan update. Does that make sense?
The comprehensive plan, by the way, was done in-house after we wasted about $200,000 on a consultant.
Okay. And it's a very good plan.
I know.
Yeah, it's a very good plan, and we may end up doing that.
I was involved in 6 of the components.
Okay, good. And that may be what we do in the future. I just was quoting what they tend to run nowadays. They're not cheap.
No, they're not.
And
we got a plan that was not adopted by the Planning Commission, never even made it to the City Commission because we did not adopt it. It was pie in the sky.
Right.
Well,
So-
we'll do better next time, right?
We will do better next time. We look forward to doing something that will carry us over until we get census in, and then we can run from there.
Good, Joe.
In the interim, though, what the manager has asked, and we will get started on shortly, is an update to the thoroughfare plan. That's important that we keep our thoroughfare plan updated, and we will be working directly with the MPO on that, as well as our engineering folks.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Lowe has a quick motion.
Really? I'm not sure we've made the longest meeting, have we? Have we made, are we holding the record now? We're close. Okay, so is there a second?
42 minutes.
All in favor? I could care less.
You've got to be kidding. This is near a record?
It's got to be.